As most of you know, I always use the opening speech to really try and frame some of the key highlights and trends of the year. And as you heard me discuss, this trend of how traditional companies are interfacing with our young startups is really one of the most important drivers of the industry. And on April 28th, 2011, Total and SunPower became the poster child for the trend when they announced a broad strategy really to shape the future of the solar energy industry. Total, the 11th largest company in the world, made a transformational investment in SunPower. It's always been one of clean tech's darlings, acquiring 60% of the company, and Total's ownership increased recently when SunPower bought Tenisol, increasing the ownership since Total had been the owner of that. And I'm really pleased to have Tom and Denis Giorno from Total discuss this groundbreaking partnership. I want to open by referencing Tom. In the 8 years we've been doing this, is the only three-peat speaker in Clean Tech Summit history. Tom first came and gave one of his first post-quiet period talks after SunPower went public. Tom was gracious enough to come back the next year, I think it was, to talk about, at the time, also one of the most groundbreaking acquisitions in clean tech history, which was SunPower's acquisition of PowerLight, instrumental for the company. And now he's back to discuss probably the most notable M&A deal of 2011 in the sector. We all know Tom as President, CEO, and Chairman of SunPower. He joined SunPower as the CEO in 2003. He took the company from $78 million in 2005 to $2.2 billion in 2011, including that successful IPO in 2005. He orchestrated the acquisition of that PowerLight deal, establishing the industry's first vertically integrated company, and to serve the residential, commercial, and utility scale power plant markets. You heard me talk about another trend in my opening, which was really the human capital influx of best and brightest from other industries. And Tom, also poster child of that trend, held a long, distinguished career in the semiconductor industry, CEO of Silicon Light Machines, which was an optical solutions subsidiary of Cypress. He served as VP and GM over at 3Com. And I'm just thrilled to have Tom here. He's been a friend for many years. He actually also shares that passion for music. We actually were rocking out about 4 months ago to another Clean Tech Summit alum, Jill Sobiel, and had a great time doing that. Denis Giorno makes his way to the summit from an entirely different path. He's been with Total for 35 years, and most recently served as President and GM of Total Gas and Power, which is a position he's held since 2007. During his time with Total, he's interacted with governments, companies, closed deals on 4 continents, in Asia, South America, Africa, and here. He's had involved in a multi-year effort for Total, driving the company's interest in solar. Please welcome me in joining two of the most recognizable faces in how traditional energy and clean tech sector can work together to shape the future of our industry. So for traditional energy, I want to start with Denis. It's interesting, Total has this new energies division. You've been with Total since 1975.
Yes, that's right.
You've seen tremendous changes over this time, both in the company's competitive focus, its culture. Why is Total more focused on clean energy today than it's ever been in the past?
Well, more than an oil company, as you know, Total is becoming a full-fledged energy producer and provides the energy that its customers need. And I would like to give what I find a very good example, which is Abu Dhabi, that I know well, because when I was a young engineer, I worked there 2 years and discussed and negotiated a few other deals, a few other projects there. We have been producing oil and gas in Abu Dhabi for more than 70 years. We started in 1939. And guess what was the name of our affiliate at the time? IPC, Iraq Petroleum Company. So it's the price side is Daniel Yergin's price side of Total's history. When the government of Abu Dhabi decided to privatize its water and electricity sector, we helped them doing so. We participated in calls for tender. And we are now producing electricity. We are owner of 1,600 megawatt of gas-fired cogeneration plant associated with water desalination, and we supply something like 1/4 of the freshwater needs of the Emirate. And more recently, when the government decided to take what is called the Masdar initiative, some of you have heard of this renewable energy initiative, we were beside the government as well. You can see a nice photograph of our president, Christophe de Margerie, with the Sheikh of Abu Dhabi. And
move your mic up a little bit, Denis. Thanks.
And is it better?
Yeah, you're good.
So we participate to this renewable energy and won a competitive tender again for solar power this time. And at the moment, we are constructing a 100-megawatt concentrated solar plant in Abu Dhabi. And this plant is going to enter into production later this year. So you see very well the way it has evolved. Oil and gas, electricity and water, and now solar power.
That's helpful. So Tom's always been one of my go-to guys as someone who really always has the insights into what's happened in the solar industry. And of course, our last year's been quite a roller coaster ride in solar. Tom, can you frame your thoughts on the state of the solar industry and then how the Total partnership helps SunPower compete in that context?
Sure. You'd think that third time's a charm and I'd learn how to dress for this thing, but the fourth try, I'll get it.
By the way, knowing Tom, this is the third day in the last 3 years I've seen him wear a tie.
Yes. The same one, too, but, you know. If 12's a little better year, we're going to go for a new tie. But, you know, and it is kind of interesting, you know, we introduced Denis, and he says only 35 years at Total, and then I feel like an ancient guy at the conference and at SunPower, right, because I've been around for 8 or 9 years.
Very good point.
So we'll talk more about that later, but perspectives are a lot different. And, you know, one of the things I'd say about how does 11 and 12 and lessons learned, you know, the big picture on solar is pretty incredible. I was interested in solar in 2003, departing from my traditional high-tech career path, and my high-tech peers thought I was absolutely crazy when I made the change. And then 3 years later, they were all asking me advice on how to move into clean tech. Not all of them, but a lot of them. But at the time, it was, boy, this is an industry that's got a couple $2 billion of total available market, and it's never had a down year in 20 years. What a phenomenal opportunity. And now we're, you know, call it 22 gigawatts of demand. If you use an ASP of, say, 4, it's only 90 billion. And we're going, oh boy, you know, growth isn't enough, and you know, we're concerned. But if you step back and you pull back and look at the industry, it's pretty phenomenal, right? When I started all of in 2003, so call it 9 years ago, we had a total available market of a couple billion. Now it's 80 billion. 4 or 5 years ago, I would visit with a utility executive, and I kid that they would show up late, leave early, and ask me to get them coffee during the meeting. You know, the idea of large-scale solar with a utility was humorous. And it was on Friday afternoon because they were getting ready to go home early. And so, you know, they weren't serious, and now we're building billion-dollar projects with utilities. So, you know, while it's a tough world out there to be accurate, the overall macroeconomics of solar are phenomenal. And if you look at the transaction, which we'll talk more about, it is the mainstreaming of solar, and it's mainstreaming of solar with real money. So it's not a conceptual thing. This is the real deal. What's going on in solar, though, is what happens in all industries is the phenomenal growth in the industry has attracted a heck of a lot of competition. There aren't natural forces to cause every new competitor thinks, I've got a new way of doing this, and despite the fact that there's hundreds of new competitors and there's likely to be oversupply, I can name this tune differently. And so invariably that adds up to overshoot and oversupply. So pre-2010, you couldn't make panels fast enough. And then I like to say equilibrium is a point you pass through. And we passed through that point in early 2010. with the changes in Italy. And then we have, quote, oversupply, which I prefer to call normal market conditions, where you actually have to sell your product. I mean, that's what most industries have to do. And rarely do you have 5 years of lines out your front door. So we've gone to normal market conditions that are hyper competitive, and what you'll see is what you've seen. You know, there's been 3 to 6 meaningful bankruptcies in the last year and a half. You'll see not a consolidation, but an attrition of solar companies, and there'll be less of us. But it's in the construct of solar going mainstream in a really, really important. We are now acknowledged as approaching a mainstream energy resource, and that's thanks to people like Ira and the people in this audience that have a lot more than 9 years of effort into this industry. You should feel damn good about how much you've done and where we're at, because we are on the verge of becoming economically relevant and mainstream, and Denis and Total are proof of that.
So huge market, there's been huge growth, understandable market conditions given the competitive dynamic that unfolds, overall optimistic. Talk about how the Total partnership here is helping you compete in this context.
Well, we have been in this solar business for a few years since we incorporated Tenesol in 1983, so it's almost 30 years. But the reason why...
A polysilicon as well?
Yes, yeah. Exactly. And when we invested in SunPower, the reason behind it is really the vision we have, or the strong belief, the strong conviction we have, that conventional energies are not going to suffice to fuel the growth. It's a little bit what Arun has explained yesterday at lunch, of this system which is constrained. We think as well that all the energy are no longer in competition. We need them all.
Right.
And therefore we think that in order to prepare the future, we have not only to continue doing what we are doing the best, our core business, developing conventional energies, conventional fossil fuels and unconventional fossil fuels. This is what we are doing with oil sands in Venezuela, in Canada, coal-bed methane in Australia, shale gas now in the US, but as well in other places, but as well develop new energies. And our industry has to decrease as well its environmental footprint.
Right.
This is what we have been doing for long now. And we think as well we have to be conscious about the greenhouse gas effect. We are among the companies who think that we should do something about the global warming, what we can.
Yep.
And therefore it was very natural to invest in solar power. By the way, becoming a leader in solar power is one of the 4 objectives of the company.
Is that right?
Yes.
Interesting. So if that was, Denis, your and Total's motivation, Tom, what was yours?
So maybe I can step back and tell you about how the deal happened.
Yeah.
And then I'll go directly into your question.
So how the deal unfolds, and then how, and the motivation for doing so.
Yeah, because the motivation changed over time. You know, so we're at an investor conference, we, SunPower, me specifically, in early 2010. And
you're wearing a tie?
At an investor conference, I went tie.
Okay, gotcha.
And do this investor conference, and at that time, solar was still very popular, so when you finished your talk, there were quite a few people that wanted to give you their card. Now there's less, but there's still some. So back in May of 2010, if I remember correctly, a boutique banker, or a banker focused on our sector, gave me his card, and we exchanged one brief email on, he said, we really ought to talk, and I said, well, why? And he said, well, there's an unnamed big company that may have interest in talking to you. And of course, we had just grown 60% or something, and we're, 2010 was a very good year, and so I sort of yawned and lit a cigar or something, but I said, look, we're good, we're growing, we're busy, but fine, we'll have our head of strategy, who many of you people know, Peter Aschenbrenner, call you up and follow up. And over the course, our position changed slightly over the course of a year of discussions. We really did start with, we have no interest in an investment. We just got out of, we just spun out of Cypress Semiconductor. Right. And if you know T.J. Rogers, that was a hell of a celebration when we accomplished that. So,
T.J. was here last year, and I think there were a lot of chuckles as a result.
Yeah, he's still presenting, I think, back in back in San Jose. That's one that's one where I'll be able to say, TJ, what I really said was, but hopefully over a glass of his wine. Anyway, so
this is what can happen when you come back 3 times.
Yeah, so our head of communications is over here going, he's off script, pull him now. So anyway, what Total's vision was, the incredibly persistent, and persistent meaning maybe we weren't clear each meeting, and they re-explain it, and consistent, and even to this day. And their view was, look, we believe solar over our time horizon, which is 5 to 20 years, is going to be that may not be exactly right, but over a longer horizon than we would typically, we in Silicon Valley anyway, would think of things. Solar is going mainstream. It's going to be part of what we offer our customers, and we can help you become a leader, the leader, and we can help you by virtue of obviously financial strength, but we can help you with the parallel companies that we've invested in, with research and development that we're doing, and oh, by the way, we're strong in 130 countries where you don't have a presence, and that are going to be meaningful in solar in the long term. And so that's been their true north, and it's become our true north because it's working, and that makes sense. For us, what went from, frankly, a relatively cocky response to over time saying, hey, maybe this makes sense, is it really costs a lot of money to grow fast. And we're burning money on both, investing money, sorry, on both ends. So we're investing in factories and we're investing in projects, and it's very capital intensive. So growth equals availability of capital. In today's world, that couldn't be more accurate, right? And so that was a motivation. But the consistency of message of, look, we're in this for the long haul, we're taking solar mainstream, we can help you in a bunch of different countries. They were, at the time, spending, I said, well, how much are you spending on solar R&D? And they go, I don't know, I can't remember. And then a few days later, they told me the number, and it was almost a quarter of what SunPower was spending. Wow. You're dabbling with a quarter of our budget. It seems like if you could focus that towards things that help us succeed, that's going to make a material difference. So it was originally not that interested, became, hey, access to the halo effect of access to less costly capital, to, hey, there's a much broader ecosystem here that helps us go mainstream and be a winner. And that was the evolution of things. And that's made a big difference as we operate today, because, of course, things are a lot different today than they were when we closed the deal.
Interesting. So part of why I think going into this detail is really helpful is there's a number of companies out there that are in a similar situation. They really see some of these benefits, and getting insight into how this deal unfolded, what they should expect. I understand Total spent 2 years looking at solar companies.
Yes,
and,
that's
I'd be interested to know what your process was, ultimately why you chose SunPower. Give some insight to those companies out there who would love for this to happen in 3 days, and that doesn't always happen that way.
No, you're very right. It's a long process, and what you've seen at the end, which was the acquisition of SunPower, is just the tip of the iceberg. Literally, we screened and benchmarked around 200 companies in 2 years, and we did this across the value chain, companies in different stages of development. We didn't go directly to integrated companies, as you can imagine. So we looked at the various elements of the chain. And doing so, meeting people, signing NDA, understanding what the companies like yours were aiming for, we came to the conclusion that really what we were looking for is a company with a certain number of attributes. Basically, we found out that what we needed was a company which was technologically differentiated. Mm-hmm. Technology differentiation was a very important point. Second, we wanted it to be as much as possible integrated. And why? Because it's a very young industry, not mature at all. The margin could evolve along the value chain, so integration was important. We wanted it to have as well access to the market, so market channel was very important as well. And the fourth element is we wanted it to have manufacturing facilities in low-cost countries, and basically in Asia. And this, finally, was a very important point as well, because we wanted the company to be able to manufacture at the lower cost possible. And doing this and realizing those were the four important points, we discovered early 2010 that SunPower was really the right match.
Does that reflect, Tom, what you think it takes to win in solar as you project out? Denis talked about differentiated technology. I mean, as you go through your list, if you project out, what is it going to take to win in solar?
Yeah, I think there's really, it's our perspective. I do want to say, by the way, we're fortunate that while they approached us, at some point we were obviously selling them. So I do want to be clear that it wasn't as simple as sort of receiving phone calls and signing papers. Mm-hmm. At some point we had to prove that we had the things he just mentioned. I think in the hyper-competitive solar industry that we're in today, the question is how do you first survive and then how do you thrive? To survive, you need a strong balance sheet. Mm-hmm. Things associated with balance sheet, which would be bankability, relationships with banks, and ability to do project finance. So things associated with balance sheet. You need technology and cost. If you're undifferentiated technology, then you better be a cost leader. If you're a differentiated technology, then you better be cost competitive. And it's all about cents per kilowatt hour. And increasingly, our customer base is sophisticated enough to go straight to cents per kilowatt hour. That's a residential lease is really cents per kilowatt hour. Commercials, PPA, and utility scale customers, I can assure you, understand cents per kilowatt hour. So differentiated technology, but it has to be cost competitive. You're not going to buy an iPod for $10,000, but you will pay a premium because it's a superior product. So for us, we have to invest and have differentiated technology. And then we believe, and Denis said it really well, that you need go-to-market because, not surprisingly, when the market switches to oversupply or normal market conditions, the negotiating leverage goes to the channel. And then the channel says to you, well, I've got 7,000 options in front of me. What's your price? And if you are the channel, then you don't have to play that game as much. I like to say you can control your own destiny and you can create a superior customer experience and differentiate on more than cents per kilowatt hour. And so go-to-market, technology, cost, balance sheet, those are the keys. And of course, they vary by company. So for us, differentiated technology, be competitive on cents per kilowatt hour, control our own destiny, and then the partnership with Total, among other things, for our balance sheet.
Makes sense. So, one of the interesting things I think about this deal is actually the creativity aspect. And, I sit in boardrooms and people talk about natural partners and acquirers, and it always ends up being the obvious. And in some ways, this was the non-obvious. And, I'd be curious, number one, how do you think about how, if you were giving advice, how companies ought to think about expanding their thinking around who they ought to be talking about, either for partnership or beyond, number one. And number two, how are you dealing with the fact that big oil isn't necessarily the most popular group out there, particularly in the community that you interact with? How do you deal with this perception issue, and how do you overcome that kind of a concern?
Well, Basically, Tom will explain this better than I do because he had to explain to his own people that he was going to marry with an oil company. And an oil company, as you say, has often a very bad press. Total has a very bad press in France. It's amazing that in our home country, we are seen as the oil company, which is not nice to environment. On the contrary, everyone else understands what we are doing for the environment.
Interesting. But Tom, how do you deal with that?
Well, it's a really relevant point. At the end, before closing the deal, I said, you know, this isn't going to be easy. I have three challenges here: BFO, Big French Oil, and it's true. You go to the employees of SunPower and you say, you know, we're growing really rapidly. We're geographically dispersed. We're relatively nimble. We're quick. We make fast decisions. And you say, and we've just taken an investment by a big company, at the time top 14 in the world, French, because we're Silicon Valley based, in oil. And on the surface, it's, you know, it was pretty risky. But I think this ties to your question. And in fact, it isn't easy. You know, post-deal, it's not easy. But the alignment of the decision makers at Total with the alignment at SunPower, when it's not easy, you can go back to True North and say, okay, what are we here for? We're here to take solar mainstream, to make it an energy option. Why are we going to succeed? The four things I mentioned. And so you can always go back to True North, but it is real. You know, when Total says, hey, we want to understand X, there's like, you know, the equivalent of the entire department for our company shows up to understand X. And so the scale, and these guys are really damn good at some things that you wouldn't on the surface intuitively project. So it's not always easy, but if you can go back to True North and at the high level though, because sometimes the implementation is a little rocky, right? And so it works because the original intent, the persistent and consistent message has stuck, and we can go back to True North.
Denis, I want to go back to deal making. I think, you know, a lot of people who talk about this really want to understand a couple aspects about it. Number one, I think the tender offer was about 50% premium over the then trading price. And number two, you ultimately ended up with 60%. You know, how did you come to those metrics?
Well, this transaction is it's a quite unique transaction. Yeah. And when we explained to our financial advisor what we wanted to do, which is a majority tender offer and not a full tender offer, they were a little bit reluctant. They told us, well, usually it's not the way it is done in the US. You do a full tender offer, you squeeze out the minority partner, you delist the company, you reorganize the company, and then you list it again if you wish. And we said, no, this is not what we want to do.
Why is that?
Well, we wanted to keep the autonomy to the company. We were quite impressed with the talented management team we had. Sorry.
I kind of like that, actually.
But we wanted to keep the management team in place. We wanted to keep the incentive packages in place. And we wanted it to continue working as it has done in the past, because it has been quite successful doing what they have done, basically. So an oil company, as you may realize, is a very large vessel. I mean, you can imagine like a tanker. So it has a specification, ways of doing things, etc. And it's, from time to time, a little bit heavy. We like to think that Total is different from the standard oil company, but it's a heavy organization, and we wanted this organization, SunPower, to continue doing work as they were usually doing.
So that answers why not full acquisition.
Exactly.
It doesn't answer the other question of why majority.
Why?
Majority.
Well,
but what did majority get you that a non-majority position wouldn't have?
Well, to be frank, during the time, the first meeting I had with Tom was in June 2010, and I explained to him what was our vision, where we wanted to go, why we thought it was a good thing of cooperating with SunPower, and that maybe we could take a minority equity participation in the company. And Tom was listening very politely, but I was able to see that he was not convinced. So it has taken us...
He left early, asked you to get coffee.
Well, it has taken...
What goes around comes around. Yeah, right. I'm back serving coffee again.
So it has taken many weeks, many months to arrive at the solution we found together,
yeah.
and where we are today. And we are quite pleased with what we are doing, basically.
So I'm sure there's companies right now in similar situations, 50% premium. Talk about that.
Well, the premium was absolutely necessary because we wanted to take a majority position of the company, and you had to convince all shareholders to bring the majority stock to us, basically, and not to wait until the time, through our cooperation, through our support, through our financial stability, or the financial stability we are bringing to the company, the stock continued to rise, and so we think it was really the right thing to do.
You know, I always like using these examples really to help teach and give lessons. And if we transcend this experience to, you know, what kinds of lessons can companies in like positions learn from this process? And there's a lot of people out there who are thinking about this. They've yet to go through the full consummation. You know, if each of you could talk about the lessons, advice you have, I think that'd be really helpful.
Well, one thing I will say, because of course we are meeting very often companies coming to us and saying, well, we need a strategic partner. It's to think deeply of why you need a strategic partner, what this will bring to your company, and as well to be patient. And this is something which is very difficult to understand when you are in this valley of death that we were speaking about yesterday. People need money quickly,
right.
And this business, or at least the way we conceive it, is a long-term association.
Would you say then that makes it even harder for private companies to interface with you, Denis, because you know, Tom had the benefit of having access to the public markets, but the private companies, you know, clearly see a wall in front of them in some ways. So, you know, how do private companies interface with you? There are a number of private companies in the audience. How would they interface with Total?
Well, we are partnering with private companies very often. In fact, we made investment in a few startups, and we are always thinking not as a financial partner, but as a full partner, helping them with their R&D. So we have put in place in the company something which is very, very new, which is taking a minority participation interest in those private-held company, but at the same time negotiating a kind of cooperation agreement whereby we bring them either experience or R&D, and this is what we did on biomass transformation quite recently with Amiris.
Right.
We invested into the company as it was a private company. Mm-hmm. Then they went and did their IPO.
Right.
And now you've heard that we signed a 50-50%
right.
participation agreement whereby we are going to invest $110 million in research and development funds.
How long had you spoken to John Mello before you actually made that initial investment?
A certain time ago, but we made the investment in June 2010, mm-hmm. and we started speaking with him in August the year before.
Okay, that's helpful. Tom, how about you?
Yeah, and the Amyris investment, though, is kind of interesting that when a big strategic decides they want to move, they can move fast, because when they got serious, my understanding is the time lapse between getting serious in investment was very brief.
Yes, very brief, you're right.
Yeah, measured in a small number of weeks,
yes.
So they can move fast. You know, a few things come to mind that better watch what you ask for. So, you know, get invested by a strategic, and there's a reason why they're called strategic, so they're going to have a lot of say, and just know where you're going. Second, Denis said it, is patience. And it's easy for me to say, right? As Ira said, we had alternatives, but you know, if you think you're going to get a quick deal done, then it's probably going to be a quick deal. And post-deal, you're going to be with a strategic going, okay, how do we make this work? And so you can, live to fight another day, but then that another day doesn't look so hot. So I think if you're going strategic, be patient, know who the decision maker is, know how long they're going to be around, what their vision is it aligned? Because if you don't have vision alignment, you're going to get a deal, you're going to get money, and it isn't going to work. It's going to be no fun post-deal. So that's not what you're all about. So it's a different, it's not fundraising, it's strategy alignment. And fundraising should be secondary. Again, easy for me to say, I realize for a lot of the folks that, you have a certain horizon that you have to operate in.
So I want to do two last questions as you project out, as you look out and see, what will ultimately be the metrics whereby you judge this as a successful partnership? How should we think about the integration and ultimately the win-win that's unfolding? Denis, how will you look at it?
Well, very simply, what we want is to be sustainably, profitably one of the three leader in this industry in the coming years. So it's really
measured by what? Is it measured by megawatts? Is it measured by the financial return on this investment? How are you thinking about it?
Well, it has to be profitable.
It meaning the investment, or it meaning the product?
No. We need to have a profitable industry and be one of the players of this industry.
Okay, so underlying
So
product.
we are not saying we have to install 5,000 megawatt by 2016 or whatever. It's being one of the players in the industry, because we have this vision that solar will be mainstream. It is becoming mainstream now. Mm-hmm. So we'll be on the long-term mainstream.
Yeah, if you ask the question, employees at SunPower will ask me, well, do you want revenue growth or do you want profit? Right. And I go, don't ask me what foot I want to shoot. I want both, right? Mm-hmm. And so what does Total want? They want a top 3 solar company that's profitable, that meets their profit metrics. When prioritized, you've got to hit the profit metrics because they have capital allocation decisions to make. And so you're not going to get capital if you can't, in a relevant horizon, show the appropriate return on that capital. So that, what'll be different though is we're very early innings of this investment. And so the horizon that I think we'll look at this doesn't mean by any stretch that they're saying, oh, it's okay, Tom, it doesn't matter what you do this quarter, we're in this for the long haul. But in terms of assessing whether it was a good deal, that's a number of years. With appropriate intensity on what are you doing for me now. Yeah.
So let's end with some prognostication. State of the solar industry as you project out. I always like to see if when we're back here in a number of years and we have the solar industry unfold, what's it going to look like? What do you think the solar industry is going to see over this coming year? What do you think it's going to see over the coming decade? Denis, let's start with you and end with Tom.
Well, first of all, we are speaking of acceleration of the growth of the solar industry. However, starting where we are starting at a very low level. If you project this to 2030, which is a relatively far horizon, the low CO2 energies are only going to represent 25%. It means that fossil fuels are still going to represent 75%. At least this is our vision, which is shared. So when you add nuclear, when you add hydropower, mm-hmm. when you add wind, and when you add solar, this will only represent 25%. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we have to plan to take a very large share. The only thing is we will have a share, and this share is going to increase with time and be very significant by 2040, 2050. Mm-hmm. So as always, you have a curve which starts slow and then at the stage become meaningful. Mm-hmm. And we are here for the time where it will become meaningful. I mean, we see in decades, we have been able to survive 70 years or a little bit more. We started in 1924, and we are looking to be here in 2060, 2070 or 2050. That's the idea.
Tom, give us a sense, over this next year, shorter time frame, what do you think is going to happen? We have a lot going on in the industry, and then project longer.
Yeah, well, let me comment. This is, when you have the cultural match, right? You heard Denis say, well, we think by 2040, 2050, and what's going through my mind is I'm 80 or 90 in that time frame.
I won't be here either.
Yeah, well, it's easy.
Still running ultra marathons.
Yeah, so. Exactly. That's why, increasing the odds that,
that you will
I'll be able to say, hey, how's it going? But, I'll answer your question. Near term, to me, it's straightforward. If you look at supply and demand balance, Italy and Germany are going to absorb less product. They are two of the top 5 biggest markets in the world. There is not another 2 markets that are going to emerge to replace those. So you're going to have a market that maybe there's some growth, but not much growth. On the supply side, there's a tremendous amount of supply coming online. Some people in the audience are just bringing your production capacity online, and you're bringing it online in the face of a customer base that's got a lot of choices. So what will happen is the things I mentioned earlier will cause a separation where companies in the oil and gas industry, they have a thing called the creaming chart, which is you essentially stack the capacity by economic position, and the x-axis is amount of capacity, the y-axis is economic position, and you draw the line where the market is, and everybody to the right of the line falls off. And that's what's happening in 11 and will continue to happen in 12. And the question is do you have the staying power to make investments so that as the economics improve and shifting to the longer term, I think we all believe, and many of you, thank you for your efforts of being in the industry much longer than me, have laid the foundation, and then new folks like me, for the solar industry to go mainstream. And Denis' vision means that all we have to look forward to is about 100 times growth. So that seems pretty damn good to me. And so, however, it's not as simple as the one nuance or tweak I want to put on this is sometimes these new guys, us new tech guys, come in and say, oh, we're going to speed the cycles of innovation, get costs down faster, get to grid parity. It's a $1 trillion market. We'll penetrate that market. We're going to be a huge company. Never mind the fact that you have to figure out policy and that the utilities kind of care if they make money or not, that you need net metering in some markets, that feed-in tariffs come and go. So what we've got, get costs down, work on grid integration, make it acceptable to our customers, and then we've got a lot of heavy lifting to do on the policy front. And as we accomplish those two things, the vision that we collectively have, SunPower's vision is simple. We change the way the world is powered. And if you think about it, it's simple, but it's hopefully compelling. And that's what we can do together, and many of you are doing. But there's the cost, which we all focused on, which is clearly you're not going to get policy the way you want it if a policymaker can say you cost too much. Go away, solar guy. So we're fixing that, and we have to fix the policy side too. And then it really is a 100x opportunity, which is pretty phenomenal.
On that note, Denis, I want to be able to invite you back when you do another major deal like you've done with Tom and SunPower. I applaud yours and Total's leadership and vision. There should be more, not only oil and gas companies, but more large companies in general doing what you and Total are doing. Tom, I joked about the three-peat, but it's really a tribute to your strategic leadership and constantly being one chess move ahead. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the next move you do that unfolds that will let us invite you back for your four-peat. Thank you both for being here.